Tell us about Kenyatta University and when you first joined.
Okay. What is today called Kenyatta University was inaugurated in February 1965. Now, the institution prior to that date had been a base, a military base for the British. The reason why it was turned into a school was because as we became a republic 2 months previously, that is December 12th, 1964, there was no longer need for British Army. As I mentioned, we had formed our own military. That is the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force. And the British had to vacate because we are now a sovereign country until we had other arrangements with them. Therefore, that base had specially been constructed and operated purely as a British military facility, residence for officers, married officers, unmarried officers, and sergeants, and the general soldiers. But it was exclusive, as I mentioned about the racial exclusion. There was no Africans except those who worked there as cooks, gardeners, mechanics, things like that. The African soldiers at that time who were serving the British military were housed at what is today Kawa Garrison. Now, at the date of Republic in December 12th, 1964, the British military left at midnight before we became independent. That means the night of 11th, they vacated. And the whole compound, the first compound of today's university, was left empty. But the British decided to donate the facility to the Kenya government to be used for purposes of their choice. The Kenya government at that time chose to turn it into an educational institution. And because it was too vast and there was very acute need for secondary education and for teachers training facilities to teach in secondary education, a decision was made to use one part of the facility as a secondary school, as a new secondary school, and use the other one as a training college for S1 teachers. So arrangements were made to get pupils who had passed their primary certificate of primary education from all over the country. It was to be a national school, and students were brought in from all corners of the country: Coast, Rift, Nyanza. North was not very much, the Eastern, and so on. Everywhere, boys were brought in from there.
So, how did you end up joining Kenyatta University as one of the first students?
Well, I was one of the lucky few who got an invitation letter to become to Kenyatta. It was then called Kenyatta College. Now, nobody knew about Kenyatta College. So when my parents and we received a letter telling me to report on such and such a date in February 1965, people were wondering what is this Kenyatta College, because other schools like Alliance and so on were known, Kagumo and others were known. And everybody kept asking, where is Kenyatta University? Where is Kenyatta College? Where is Kenyatta College?
Had you applied to
No,
Kenyatta
nobody
College?
had applied. Nobody. It was an arbitrary selection from the
Mm.
Ministry of Education. They had suddenly got a facility, and they wanted some of the brighter boys from all over the country and set up this prestigious. It was prestigious, let me say, and the facilities were excellent and so on. So I was among the first boys. I was actually 15. I was number 15 to get admitted, the first class in 1965. So we reported in February, and we found strange boys. I had heard of Kisii people. I had heard of other people. I hadn't met, and it was the first time for me to meet people from various other parts of the country.
So what was day one? And it being a military facility, had it changed? Had they renovated it, or there was still gunpowder?
No, they had maintained it very excellently. The workers who served the British Army were retained, the cooks, the gardeners, the maintenance people, were all maintained because they were Africans and a few Asians here and there. And they were to continue serving us. And therefore, on day one, when I remember when I reported, I came with another young boy, and we were dropped at the main gate on Thika Road, and we were told this is the entry. Go on. So we entered. We were only allowed, we were only required to bring in a pair of shoes only. There was nothing else. Everything else was there. Just a pair of shoes, because most African children before that time were not wearing shoes. It was the first thing to wear a shoe, to get a shoe. So we had a pair of shoes, socks, nothing else, with a little bag here and there. So we walked in, and we found the teachers were all Mzungus, because at that time there was no African, particularly in the first year, or the first larger part of the first year, were no African teachers until much later, because there was none, and the demand for them was very high. So the majority of our teachers and our masters and so on were British. And of course, the headmaster was a British man called Mr. Stewart. So we found him in the office, and the first thing he spoke to us in the English. And you see that quite well, we got a word of his speech, a word or so, but we had a lot of difficulty in understanding English spoken by an Englishman.
Were you speaking English at that time?
Yes, we had to speak. There was no other language in the school.
But when you were coming from the village, so you were speaking English
We
even in
had
the
learned English as a language.
in school. Okay.
Yes, and you had to really find words from wherever and use it. So that was the difficult, and also conversing with your fellow students from different parts of Kenya. We had to use English. Swahili was not good.
So what were you studying at
Well,
Kenyatta
we
College?
went into a secondary school from the general one. And the first class, the first intake was contained of 6 streams of Form 1s. And for the first 2 years, we had the normal secondary curriculum. And when we reached Form 3, then we were separated, science and arts, and in preparation for our final exam and then into higher education. in readiness for the university. And so we had the first class in 1965, and the following year they admitted another class for secondary school. But just before I forget, there was also, during 1965, later in the year, they admitted the higher education, uh, which was a 2-year program in preparation for the university. So we had our seniors who found us already there, and we were calling them Joka, and they didn't like it. Now the following year, 66, they admitted another Form 1, and then from there, the secondary school ceased to exist. They ran those classes to the end, and there were no further admission for secondary school. It was turned fully into a higher education section, and finally into into a degree program for education.
That's how it eventually became Kenyatta
Yes,
University.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how long were you there?
4 years.
Okay. And by the time you were leaving,
Oh, by the time you see the environment, particularly for the first year, was very British. Um, Even the behavior of the workers who had served with the British soldiers and officers was very British, mannerisms and so on. So we had to adapt, and some of us found it very difficult. And then the food itself, what we were offered initially was a British food in the dining rooms. And some of us said, yes, it's time. But most boys found it unacceptable, and there were complaints of some boys from certain parts of Kenya saying they are not getting enough. This is not the type of thing they want their stomachs full. And we
because you're going from eating ugali and maize and grounded food to salads.
yes, those sort of salads, cold salads, meat.
Which did you prefer, the British menu or the one you knew?
I preferred the new menu
Oh wow.
because you have left. It's better to adopt because the world, you have to accept change. I preferred the new menu. Yeah.
Okay. And you were full
Yes,
on salad.
maybe I was a small body size. I was quite okay, but many of our fellow students felt it was not sufficient. It was not tasting the way they used to be, and they were accommodated. The changes were made to the food, and so to make the boys feel comfortable.
And finally, maybe tell us what are some of the changes, if you can think of any, from when you were there to the Kenyatta University you hear about now.
It has, right from the beginning, it has sufficient facilities, big land, lot of land, playing field, sports facilities, very expansive, swimming pools. We had a church which was mainly used as an Anglican church at that time because the British were Anglican. But when we went in there, the church was then shared different faiths. So the Catholic Church, the Catholic faithful would hold early prayers, and then the Protestants would hold their prayers later in the day, and so forth and so on. There was a lot of harmony, and as we moved on, there was Africans coming into teaching staff and their technical staff because they got qualified from other institutions. There was an education program in a place like Makerere University. Some were coming from Dar and so on. So slowly, the great pace of Africanization of the teaching profession proceeded very well, and also in the administration matters of the university. So And during one of my recent visits a couple of years back, I saw they had also built some houses, additional housing. What I didn't like was that they had abandoned the old design. So what they were building today doesn't take the art and the design of the old campus. It, it's a normal, it's just not a building somewhere because there was space. Otherwise, I think it's doing its job very well. It has produced a lot of people and it has a bias in arts. It has produced a lot of writers and theater and so on. I like that. And as a school which brought in boys, young men, boys who turned out to become young men from different parts of the country. It played a very important role in integrating young people who didn't know prior to that, who hadn't even met, had not even known the cultural situation in other parts of the country. And we learned firsthand to work together. We grew together. We had all these experiences together. And it was it played a very important role in bringing that integration and appreciation of the different people of Kenya as they grew up to become citizens.